First, let's take a look at our 3D model. We already completed column footings and wall footing at right side, which we called WF1. Now go back to 2D and let's continue with wall footings. Now I like to start wall footing shown at the left, which has section detail 2. Click on the multilinear tool and name this footing WF2. Then select a color. I like to keep similar elements with the same color. Then click on Group and change the group to Wall Footings. By looking at section 2, enter the width as 6 feet 10 inches and the thickness as 1 foot and 1 inch. For the elevation, select Top from the drop-down menu and enter -12 feet 6 inches. Element type is concrete, and don't change concrete and class since they are already correct. Finally, click OK. By pressing the left mouse button, you can start your element by clicking on the screen. First, zoom in to the beginning of the WF2 wall footing and click on the first point. Don't worry if the footing doesn't align perfectly with the lines on the drawing, we can edit it later. Next, click on the corner, then double-click where the first step starts to end the first segment. Move to the last footing line and click to continue, then click where the footing ends. Press the Escape button to finish the element. Now, you can go over to Element and right-click to edit it to align it perfectly with the drawing. Click the anchor points and drag them to location you want them. When done, press Escape to finish editing. Let's take a look at the 3D model. We have successfully added the WF2 footing. Now we will add step footings. Switch back to the 2D view. This time, we will create separate WF2 elements for each step elevation. Let's start with the first step, which is at elevation -13 feet and 6 inches. Click on the multilinear tool, name this one WF2 FS1 as first step, and select a color. The group is wall footings, and the width and thickness remain the same as WF2. 6 feet and 10 inches, and 1 foot and 1 inch. Only top elevation will be different than WF2. Select Top from the drop-down menu and type -13 feet 6 inches. Then click OK. Begin by clicking where the lower footing steps to the higher footing and stop at the step. Repeat this process for the right side. Now, check your work in the 3D model by zooming in on the WF2 first step. You'll see the top of the footing is at -13 feet 6 inches, but the footing ends tip to tip with the higher footing. In reality, a stepped footing needs to extend under and support the footing at the higher elevation. Now switch back to the 2D view. Select the WF2 first step, right-click to enter Edit, and drag the anchor point to extend the footing underneath the higher footing by a couple of feet. Repeat this adjustment for the right side. Select the first step elevation, right-click, and drag the anchor point under the higher footing by a couple of feet. Finally, return to the 3D view to review your changes. You'll see that the lower footing now supports the higher footing as it should. Now, let's create stepped footings at elevations -14 feet and 6 inches and -15 feet and 6 inches. This time, we won't create separate elements. Instead, we'll use the original WF2 footing element. From the left panel, press the play button next to the WF2 footing. First, let's do the elevation at -14 feet and 6 inches. Click the first point, then extend it under the higher footing. Do the same on the right side. Click and extend it under the higher footing. Next, for the elevation at -15 feet and 6 inches, start under the higher footing and end under the higher footing. Press Escape to finish. Now, go over the last stepped footing we added, right-click, and select Edit. In the right panel, you'll notice the top elevation is still set to -12 feet 6 inches. This happens because we used the original WF2 element, which was assigned that elevation. Press Escape to exit the Edit mode and switch to the 3D view. You'll see that since we used the original WF2 element, the steps weren't created. Switch back to the 2D view, right-click the footing, and enter Edit. Now, Adjust the lowest footing elevation to -15 feet and 6 inches and the upper footing elevation to -14 feet and 6 inches. Note that changing these values in the right panel doesn't affect the original WF2 element's values. Go back to the 3D view to verify the changes. You'll see that using the original WF2 element allowed us to create the stepped footings. The advantage of this method is that you don't need to create separate elements for each step elevation, and the WF2 rebar will automatically apply to these steps. However, there is an important disadvantage to be aware of. Let's return to the 2D view. If, for any reason, you go to the Edit menu via the 3 dots in the left panel and accidentally click OK, all WF2 element elevations will reset to the original -12 feet and 6 inches elevation. Let's look at the 3D view again to visualize the impact of this. This is something to keep in mind when using this method. As you can see, we lost all the work we did to create steps. I will go back into 2D and change back elevations from right panel again to create stepped footings, which you already know how to do. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at the rebar form, and together, we'll go through the process of adding rebar to WF2 footing. Stay tuned.